mindful of that throughout the course of today's procession. Also a note that we do have translation devices available should you require them, and we have a sign language interpreter online who can translate the proceedings to those viewing on YouTube. Also, just a special request, if you could please put your devices on mute so that they do not interrupt today's session. I'm now going to hand over to the members to introduce themselves. In no particular order, I'll start with yourself.
All right. Good morning, everybody. My name is Chairperson Fisia Hassan. I'm the Chairperson of the Economic Development, Agriculture, Land and Rural Development and the Environment Portfolio Committee from the Gauteng Legislature. I'm also the youngest member. I'm joined by a wonderful delegation, but I'll allow them to introduce themselves. And I don't know, through you, Chair, maybe we can introduce the Gauteng delegation first, and then we can take it from there.
Okay. My name is Sizagele Nkosi Malobane. I'm the member of this committee, but also chair of chairs in the Gauteng Legislature. I'm part of the presiding officers there. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Mapefo Mohale Litsie. I'm a member of this portfolio committee. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everybody. Here it says I'm Honorable L.M. Vimbi. That can't be right. I'm Bishop Adams. I'm a member of this committee. Thank you so much.
Ndimachironi, dzina langa ndi Azwi Chitangano. I'm a member of this committee.
Goeiemôre, ek is Beverly Felicity Badenhorst. Ek is 'n lid van hierdie komitee. Dankie.
Good morning, Matlodi Maseko, alternate member for this committee.
Thank you. There's a echo there. Hello? Gillian, are you open or not? Hello? Okay. Good morning, goeiemôre, everyone. My name is Ricardo Mackenzie. I'm a member of the Western Cape Parliament. We call ourselves a parliament because we have our own constitution. I'm the chairperson of Transport and Public Works, and I think I've chaired every committee in this parliament for the last 9 years. So I'm a veteran of this parliament. Thank you for being here. In fact, chairperson, post-2019, I think it was the Premier David Makura, when he came to the Western Cape. We were supposed to do this 3 years ago. So we appreciate that it actually started, because we're due for your visit to visit your budget committee on a new piece of legislation that we're busy with currently. So we are coming to you in the next few weeks, if not beginning of January. So this is long overdue from our side as well. So thank you for coming. It's really appreciated. We wanted to do this for the last 8 years. So this is long overdue. Thank you very much. I have a pleasure having you guys here.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Gillian Bosman. I'm the chairperson for Community Safety, Cultural Affairs and Sports in the Provincial Parliament in the Western Cape. If Member Mackenzie is a veteran, then I'm a spring chicken.
Good morning, honorable members and colleagues. My name is Anthony Tshwarelo Malapani. I'm a researcher supporting the committee from the Gauteng Provincial Legislature.
Absheni, my name is Mkateko Makobele. I'm also a researcher supporting the committee in Gauteng. Thanks.
Good morning, honorable members and colleagues. My name is Lebogang Mampe. I am the committee coordinator responsible for agriculture and rural development component from the Gauteng Provincial Legislature. Thank you.
Good morning, honorable members and colleagues. My name is Bongani Mabuza, researcher for agriculture. Thank you.
Good morning, honorable members. My name is Thabo Skosana. I am the senior committee coordinator responsible for economic development. Thank you.
Good morning, Chairperson, honourable members, officials. My name is Mario Sassman. I am the manager for the committee support section in the Western Cape Provincial Parliament. Thank you.
Good morning, members. Lizette Kluter, Senior Committee Coordinator, Cluster C.
Good morning, Zaida Adams, Procedure Officer for the Standing Committee on Finance, Economic Opportunities and Tourism.
Good morning, members. Masintla Motsapi, Committee Assistant. Thank you.
Good morning, Chairperson and honourable members. My name is Joshua Vormrans. I'm from the Department of Economic Development and Tourism in the Western Cape.
Good morning, Sharif David from Enterprise Development. I'm from the Economic Department as well.
Hi everyone, my name is Khotso Murudi and I too am from DDAT with Enterprise Development. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson. Thank you, Chairperson and honourable members. Today we're presenting on the SMME Booster Fund. Maybe just to give you some context around, I think, why we looked at the SMME Booster Fund. So as we're aware that SMMEs are confronted by high levels of closure rates within the context of South Africa, but also low startup rates in the South African context. A lot of this is also borne through evidence from the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor, which monitors your total entrepreneurial early stage entrepreneurial activity rate, which is called the TE rate. And the TE rate has been positive in South Africa between 2019 and 2021, where it increased from 10.8% to 17.5%, which is important from a established or a startup rate for businesses, but also the movement of businesses to more established businesses. But I think that the concerning factor is around business discontinuance. South Africa's rate at the moment is 13.9% versus the global rate of 6.5%. So more businesses between 2019 and 2021 have closed down in South Africa. So I think that is a particular concerning statistics. And I think that also presents some kind of backdrop in terms of the SMME Booster Fund in that particular regard. So just to talk about the purpose and the objective of the SMME Booster Fund. So the fund was established to provide support to interventions implemented by both organizations and or municipalities that are geared towards supporting SMMEs in the Western Cape. As we've indicated that there's a weak ecosystem of support available to SMMEs. So there is support available, but those ecosystem of support is not talking to each other. Businesses are not aware of the support that's being offered. So the part of the fund is to look at how do we partner with organizations to look at supporting small businesses. The fund also looks at enhancing or expanding projects and programs, both existing and new, aimed at the development and growth of SMMEs. I will give some, just in the next slide, an understanding of what do we mean by enhancing and expanding projects and programs. But it's also, I think, more importantly, to look at the objective of job creation and job retention. It's also looking at business expansion, especially looking at from a perspective of how do we change our turnover within the business, and also looking at providing infrastructure provision or trading spaces for SMMEs, especially small and micro businesses, especially in areas outside of the Cape Metro. And it's about how do we look at supporting and strengthening the ecosystem stakeholders that provide support to SMMEs in the Western Cape. So the Booster Fund is a demand-led, partnership-driven, collaborative model focused on enhancing the SMME ecosystem and delivering impactful interventions to selected and target categories of SMMEs and entrepreneurs. So the potential partner organizations in that sense are required to demonstrate that they're already providing support or services to SMMEs. And then we're looking at growing and enhancing the sustainability of SMMEs through this particular fund that we have in the Western Cape. So just an example in terms of when we talk about expansion, what does that mean? So we're supporting an organization called WAMUP. It's a national organization that predominantly supports women-owned businesses across the country. So we're supporting them through the Economic Growth Amplifier. So WAMUP generally supports 3 to 5 Western Cape-based women-owned businesses on an annual basis. So with the support that we provide through the Booster Fund, they can now look at increasing that support to 30 businesses in the Western Cape. So in that sense, an additional between 25 to 27 businesses would be supported, women-owned businesses would be supported in the Western Cape. Part of the support will also then be to be able to provide them with cash grants for equipment for all 30 incubators. And I think more importantly, it's about the establishment of an innovation hub or shared workspace where those businesses can utilize that space for all that are linked to the Economic Growth Amplifier. And an example, for example, of enhancements is linked to the SA Agri Academy, where the fund that we're supporting through SA Agri Academy, it's about looking at training, mentorship, coaching, and technical support to especially emerging farmers in primary agriculture. So with the support of the fund in that regard, it provides them with additional sources of revenue in the sense that we provide them with hospitality training, coaching, there's on-site work placement, and also the provision of equipment. What the support also provides is that we provide them with food trucks where they're able to, in that sense, also go to different markets and are able to sell their produce in that sense as well. So those are just examples of both expansions and enhancements. In terms of the categories of support, there's 4 categories that we've traditionally supported. We've abandoned 2 of those particular areas. The one is Business Development Support Program. And here we're talking about particularly training, mentorship, and coaching. And I'll expand on that one in the slides that are after this. SMMEs in distress here, we looked at specifically in the 2019 SMME Booster Fund to support businesses, and especially that time during the drought, how do we support businesses that are experiencing certain particular challenges? And the fund in that sense tried to support businesses through turnaround strategies that was provided at that time, which is Productivity South Africa, which is one of the organizations that we funded. Then looking at infrastructure development, and I'll talk to this and also give some examples later on in the slide. But oftentimes there's no spaces for, especially your informal and your micro businesses, especially in outside areas, outside of the Cape Metropole or the CBD, to conduct their business with. So the infrastructure development is about looking at how do we support them through trading spaces. Then access to markets is also a big category, and there's different categories which I'll also expand on in the preceding slides as well. So in the business development support, this is just an example of the SMME Booster Fund 22. We had 2 categories where we supported businesses. So the business development support, and here we're focusing a lot on businesses that are owned by youth, women, and people living with disabilities. So the issue there is around how do we look at supporting businesses through mentorship, coaching, marketing, bespoke support, for example, equipment, licensing, for example, if they need to export particular products, or, for example, have HACCP certification for them to conduct their operations. But one of the things that we don't do is just fund one particular aspect of a business. So, for example, if we get any proposal that focuses only on training, the fund will not support that. So we're looking at how do we look at a collection of support measures that enables a business to be able to grow and to develop in that particular sense. So the access to market category focuses on 3 particular areas. Here we're looking at businesses that are looking at corporates, business incubators, and organizations that are implementing enterprise and supply development initiatives that enables market access to these particular SMMEs. I mean, your ESD is also linked to the BE codes, so that is a key category that we look at in terms of those organizations that supply or support enterprise and supply development programs. Then organizations that facilitate access to market opportunities, both in the public and in the private sector. And then organizations involved in both import replacement or export development as part of broader supply chains. So those are the three categories within the access to market category. Maybe just to give you an overview of the process in that, what is the process we embark upon before we look at the selection of potential beneficiary organizations? So every year there's a review that's done internally within the department to look at what has been the successes of the SMME Booster Fund, what are the things that has worked, where are the challenges, and then we try and refine that in terms of our next call for proposals. And we look at how do we take the lessons that we've learned and basically enhance and develop the particular system. So we normally do a call for proposals, and this is both in print media and in social media, and it's done through an online application process. So organizations are then informed. They can apply for this via the media, but also through our communication channels. And it's an online application process that guides them through the particular areas that they need to submit the information. There's also a dedicated email support that we provide. So if applicants have any particular challenges, whether it's IT related or other issues, there is support, backup support for them, so to ensure that we facilitate the application process as well. So that is provided, and normally the call for proposals open for 1 month, and we provide that support during that particular month to facilitate the application process for businesses. Then we have what we call a pre-evaluation process, and the pre-evaluation is basically looking at, as part of our call for proposals, we will indicate what are the kind of minimum criteria that the organization must comply with. So the pre-evaluation in that sense is conducted by our financial management unit, headed up by our CFO, and they basically look at the compliance linked to all the applicants that have made the application to the SMME Booster Fund. So based on that, they will then determine those that are compliant and those are not compliant. So it's just purely a compliance check to make sure that you've met. So for example, if we require that you submit your annual financial statements or your tax clearance certificate, they will check those kind of things, whether that's been submitted. If it has, you'll go through in terms of the next round of the application process. Then we have what we call a project evaluation committee. So also just to mention that all the committees are independent. So there's no members serving on more than one committee. The project evaluation committee, they've got a set of evaluation criteria and they've got a score sheet whereby they monitor and assess every application that has been approved by the pre-evaluation committee. They also look at a minimum threshold and they evaluate the applicants based on the particular criteria that has been determined. And in that sense, they also then make recommendations to the project adjudication committee. So the project adjudication committee then is your overarching or your final decision-making body within the department, and it consists of your senior managers within the department. And the interesting thing about it, so the managers are across different programs. So they look at, for example, from skills development to digital economy. So there's a whole range of program managers with a broad range of set of skills that assesses the applications from different perspectives. There's also certain criteria that's determined by the PAC in that sense. And obviously based on the availability of budget, that applications would then be successful. Following that particular process on the identification of successful applicants, there's a whole notification of the successful applications or applicants. And then there's a TPA process, a transfer payment agreement process that then gets embarked upon, whereby we look at what are the key criteria for the based on the proposal that was received, and what are then the deliverables linked to each of those particular payments, because we only disburse funds on the basis of achievement of deliverables linked to those particular organizations. Then obviously there's a regular disbursement of the funds based on the transfer payment agreement, and there's also site visits that's conducted both to the organization but also to the businesses. So we make sure, for example, that there's the organization is disbursing the funds and giving the support to the businesses. So the reason for the site visits to the businesses is to ensure that what the organization is telling us is actually benefiting the businesses. Because we have found that sometimes in previous projects that there's sometimes not a correlation between the two. So we make sure that whatever, if you're saying you're supporting 30, we will go do a site visit at a sample of those businesses to make sure that they're benefiting from the particular project. So making sure that there's proper governance measures that are in place. This is just a bit of an analysis between Booster Fund 2019. So we've had 3 iterations of the Booster Fund so far. So in 2019 and 21, we've received over 100 proposals for the SMME Booster Fund. In 2019, over 100 proposals amounted to over 300 million rand in applicants looking for support to support businesses. In 2021, it was about 233 million. So in 2019, we've looked at 37 proposals as part of post the pre-evaluation and the project evaluation committee. 18 projects were submitted and approved by the project adjudication committee. And in that sense, funding was then provided to those particular organizations. In 2021, 10 projects were approved and support was given to those particular organizations as well. So and I'll talk later on in terms of the budgets we had available in 2019, 34.46 million, and in 2021 we had 27.3 million rand over a 2-year period. So just this summary in terms of I think the success of the Booster Fund so far. In 2019, we did an assessment, or post 2019, we did an assessment on the Booster Fund. So given the budget of 31.5 million, we've leveraged 53.1 million rand of support. So I must just emphasize, in 2019, we included issues like, for example, value add, where, for example, if an organization makes available its facilities to where businesses can come and to provide them with equipment and those kind of things, they utilize those services. Those would be considered as value add as opposed to, so it'd be value add component and financial direct cash. So we leveraged 53.1 million rand in terms of funding based on our level of support of 31.5. We've supported 384 businesses through our funding or support. 50% of those were youth and 49% were women-owned businesses. We've to date created 423 jobs and we've sustained 2,359 jobs. At an average cost, we've supported businesses to the tune of 82,000 rand. And the average cost, I think, per job created was less than 75,000 rand. So I think that is just the overview in terms of the SMME Booster Fund so far. Of the businesses that we've assessed as well, 36 of them have increased in their turnover. Of the 384 businesses that we supported, 84% of them are still operational. And I must just emphasize that when you look at the success of the Booster Fund, we must bear in mind the context of the COVID-19. The SMME Booster Fund started in October, November 2019, where lockdown measures happened in March, April 2020. So just bear in mind that during this entire period, between 2019 and 2020, these businesses were in different levels of lockdown and different levels of operation. So the success, I think, must just be considered in that. And I think also it bears testimony to a lot of the organizations, the way they planned their interventions was focused on kind of face-to-face engagement. Then they had to basically pivot their programs to provide online facilities. And I mean, we know the challenges around data availability of certain, equipment like your laptops and computers. So there are certain challenges that these businesses and organizations were confronted with. So I think the successes must just be considered within that particular context. And I think the jobs that was created and sustained ensured the livelihoods of the employees. And I mean, I'll talk to some of the successes further on in terms of the presentation, in terms of what the success of the business, the Booster Fund enabled these businesses to basically remain sustainable and some of them actually grow in terms of their turnover as well. Also, just to emphasize that one of the key criteria that we use is to assess to what extent is the funding directly being allocated to the businesses. So that's one of the criteria that we assess, and we can argue that the majority of the funding went directly to support the businesses that we are supporting. So it wasn't funding to support the operations of the organization, but it's directly to support the businesses in terms of benefiting from the services through the SMME Booster Fund. So this is just broadly a synopsis in terms of what I've just outlined. 384 businesses assisted. We sustained 324, sustained 2,359 jobs, and we created 423 jobs in that particular regard. So in terms of the 2019 cohort, these are just some of the examples of the businesses. So we visited, for example, Globescope. which was one of the businesses that was supported through the Innovator Trust, and the Innovator Trust is also linked to Vodacom, where they do their enterprise and supply development program. So they focus predominantly on your ICT type businesses. So Globescope is a business that does security services. They, for example, install electric fencing, but because of COVID, they couldn't operate. What then happened, because of the support of the Innovator Trust, they were supported through mentoring and coaching, especially in terms of pivoting their operations. They then started the manufacture of, got involved with PPE manufacture, especially when you look at these hand sanitizing or the dispensing machines that you find in the shopping malls, especially during the lockdown period. And now they started manufacturing those for some of the bigger corporates in South Africa. And I think what is important is that what the owner indicated to us, that a business before COVID was stagnating and they were struggling to grow. Through the intervention and support, they've tripled their turnover. They've managed to open a second branch in Gauteng. They increased employment from 10 to 23, and we've also just recently learned that they've also opened a branch in Botswana as well over the last few weeks. So I think that's one of the testaments in terms of the success of the Booster Fund. Another, also in terms of the Innovator Trust, these are businesses that started on the 2019 program, and Innovator Trust had an awards evening just about a month ago or so. And these three businesses that were part of those cohort then won particular prizes. The one, for example, the best all-round businesses. And that all-round business would look at focusing on employment and turnover, and just in terms of the broader operations of the business. Roscoe Adams from Headbite, they won in terms of the highest turnover. And then also QuickLock, they won in terms of the top employment creator business within that innovator stable in that particular sense. Edge Growth is another organization that we partnered with during this particular process. Integram Global Solutions, also one of the success factors. I think the issue there also was around the support that was given through the mentorship and the coaching by the organization. But I think also the funding that was provided to the business enabled them to focus on the core operations of the business, as opposed to dealing with how they're going to basically support themselves in terms of the general operational cost into a rental expenditure, as an example. These are just pictures also of businesses that were supported through the SMME Booster Fund. This is just an example of one of the projects that we supported. We provided trading spaces in both the Cape Agulhas and the Witzenberg. And generally these places or areas were vacant lots, and now we've basically created spaces that are integrated within the community, and where there's some of them are located close to, for example, your taxi rank in certain areas, but it's about providing in a space where these businesses or traders can now operate from a more structured space. I believe there was a standing committee visit to Bredasdorp, I think last week as well, to one of the facilities that the Booster Fund has supported. This is one of the projects, and this was actually a physical structure. It was a brick and mortar structure in Laingsburg, where we also then, as part of our funding, been able to create additional trading spaces within the Laingsburg municipality. Can I continue, Chair? So just in terms of the SMME Booster Fund 21, these are the 10 organizations that we supported, both organizations and municipalities. You can see from that, just in terms of the ones that are marked with the asterisk, those are the infrastructure projects are currently still being built and developed. So we haven't placed any of those traders in those spaces yet, because obviously with the construction takes some time, and especially with the impact of COVID, it also prolonged the finalization of these particular projects. So those are the projected number of businesses that will be supported. So we can see with the SMME Booster Fund, we're looking at supporting 321 businesses if everything comes on stream in terms of those 5 categories of infrastructure support businesses. These are just the examples of those businesses, and a bit of a description in terms of the projects, what is the funding that we provided to those businesses or those organizations, and then also looking at when they are looking at completing. So I must just emphasize that the Booster Fund, although we try and do it within a year, but it generally transcends 2 financial years and between 18 months or so before the process or the project comes to conclusion. So the important part is also that between the departmental funding and their own funding, that's how the project then gets managed over that particular period. Just to look at the impact again of the Booster Fund 2021, I must just caution that this is preliminary statistics or that we have at the moment, because obviously some of the projects are still underway, especially the infrastructure projects. But then also there's 4 other projects in the business development support category and the access to market category that will still be finalized. So we've had a budget of 14.9 million rand. We've managed to secure 14.3 million rand of funding support. We supported 263 businesses, which excludes the infrastructure projects businesses, and of that 52.8% were women-owned, 44.1% were youth-owned. We created 96 jobs, but I'm just emphasize that's only based on the completion of one particular project linked to R Labs, and I'll go into a bit of detail linked to that in a later slide. The average cost per job was 57,000 rand, and then the cost per job through the R Labs project was 22,395 rand. So that's, I think, just initial achievements. Just to focus on the one project that was completed in the Booster Fund 2021 is R Labs. Through that particular support, they created or supported 105 businesses, and these are predominantly your startup businesses. They created 96 jobs so far, I said at a cost of 22,000, just over 22,000. And of that 105, 56 of those businesses increased their turnover. One of the companies, for example, is Lotto. You could see they were assisted with raising additional funding. And for example, they received a contract from Cipla Foundation worth 1 million rand. So I think within the space of a year, there's been significant success linked to just R Labs and some of the businesses that they've particularly supported in that regard. Here, as you can see, is some of the developments linked to the municipal infrastructure projects. Some of them are still underway and being developed. And these are just some of the pictures in terms of, like, for example, the CISA project, where we've supported businesses in Gugulethu and in Fuleni and other areas as well. This is the just pictures in terms of the Wolverdans and Mayakele project in Mossel Bay. And then this is the official sod turning ceremony in Swellendam. So these projects are still being developed by the municipality. Just a bit of an update on SMME Booster Fund 2022. So we did a call for proposals. We had 52 applicants that we've received. We also looking at the value of funding for those applications was 111 million. 14 were shortlisted. 7 of those projects were approved to the value of 18.5 million. And we've supported, out of those 7 organizations, you can see the number next to the organization. EdGrowth will support 30 businesses. An organization like R Labs, again, would support 100 businesses as well. So just some of the challenges in terms of the implementation of the SMME Booster Fund. As I've indicated, SMMEs are confronted by a broad range of access to finance, access to markets, your business development support. I think one of the issues that we looked at was the capacity of partner organizations to deliver on the requirements of the agreement, both within time and budget. And I think for us, that's why we have such a rigorous process to make sure that we choose the right partners that can implement projects and that has the reputation to deliver on the achievement on those particular projects. The COVID-19 specifically was the challenge around the changes in the delivery mechanism, especially the in-person versus online, and the associated delays because obviously business right in that. There was also global factors, for example, the war in Ukraine, which also saw an increase in the price of both steel and oil. That impacted significantly on the containers within that we are establishing in terms of the trading spaces. So we've seen a significant rise in the cost linked to the business box. And then obviously, as I indicated, that the timeframes that's linked to the implementation of the project can't just be done in one financial year. And also the lag before we can actually assess the impact And that normally takes 18 to 24 months post the implementation for us to determine what has been the impact of that particular initiative. As I've demonstrated through the Innovative Trust example, it took about that particular time for that businesses following its receipt of support until when you saw the impact on that particular business. Because I think it's a bit naive to think if you provide a business with training now, in a month or two, you'll see any significant change in terms of support or impact on the business. So looking ahead, we will continue. I mean, one of the key focus areas of the Western Cape government is the focus on job creation and how do we grow the economy. So I think that will be the core focus of the Booster Fund, focusing on job creation and enabling businesses to not just sustain themselves, but also to grow. We're looking at especially focusing on the sustainability of growth of SMMEs, enabling them to navigate the post-COVID-19 recovery process, and especially given the broader macroeconomic challenges that are confronted by SMMEs and businesses, both locally. And then obviously we want to strongly accentuate the focus on businesses that are operated by women, youth, and people living with disabilities. Because I think we make that as one of the clear criteria in terms of the SMME Booster Fund. There will be continuous review and focus of the fund to look at how do we enhance the impact of the fund and how do we look at growing and leveraging resources and enhancing partnership formations. So I think given especially the fiscal constraint that we sit with, there's a need for partnership formations, both within the public and private sector, and then the need to coordinate the support around the SMME ecosystem. Consideration also that we're looking at for future next booster is looking at a more sectoral approach, focusing on your labor absorptive sectors, and that is also being considered. I've just in summary, Chair, just looked at the impact on just at a macro level in terms of the booster fund in 2019 and 2021. We had a budget of 46.4 million rand. We've supported 647 businesses, which excludes the 57 that's projected for the infrastructure projects. 55% were women-owned, 52 youth-owned. We've leveraged 60.7 million rand. We've created 590 jobs, and that's still preliminary because obviously the other 9 projects must all be finalized by the end of this financial year. We've developed partnerships with 25 organizations. Average cost per business was 64,000 rand that we supported businesses with. And then the average cost per job in 2019 was 75,000 rand. And the current one is 22,000, but that's a preliminary figure that we're sitting with at the moment. So I don't want to say that is the actual cost because we're still waiting on the figures coming in from the other 9 projects. And then specifically on the infrastructure projects, we've spent 17.6 million. And these are predominantly areas outside of the Cape Metro and predominantly in your township areas outside of the Cape Metro. We've supported 11 infrastructure projects. 147 businesses were supported. These are still preliminary because that 57 needs to be added. We've created 49 jobs and sustained 61 jobs. And these are all preliminary statistics. We've leveraged funding to the value of 6.7 million, and we've partnered with 8 municipalities during this particular process, Chair. Chair, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. It was a very welcome presentation, and I think there's been a lot of interest and notes taken. We'll now move on to questions and answers. My mic? Can you hear me now? Okay, we'll now move on to questions and answers. So thank you very much for the presentation. I'd like to propose that we take questions in, if you could give 3 questions at a time so that we don't bombard the department. I'll start with my questions. My first 3 questions are, if you could please provide more information on the accelerators use. I see R Labs comes up quite a bit. And what are the roles that the different accelerators play, or how are they utilized differently? Then what support is given to include businesses in the digital economy and to help them adopt cashless payment options? And then finally for this round, what criteria is used to admit the various SMMEs onto the program? Are there any hands? Okay, I see. All right. So hands, 1, 2, 3. Okay, over to you, sir.
Let me firstly appreciate the presentation. Thank you so much. It's an honor for us to be here today. I think we can mirror exactly what is happening in Gauteng with regards to the point that you mentioned, where you say that businesses are not fully aware of the booster fund being available, and that this opportunity is there for them, and we also experience that in our legislature, in the Economic Development Department, in different funding mechanisms, that how we communicate to our public and to our businesses and SMMEs needs much to be worked at firstly, and I think that's the one thing that I want us to talk about. And you talk about the 3 to 5 Western Cape businesswomen, and that is funded, and it increases, again. Maybe just what was the budget for that particular expansion announcement that these Women Hub got? I just want to equate the budget there, and then lastly, you talk about the PEC, that is the Public and Evaluation Committee. You say that the managers in departments as the final say. Now, the word public, I want us to just look at, is JOSO part of that public adjudication committee that sees who gets the final funding? Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Member. Honourable.
Thank you very much. One of the questions that I wanted to ask was the same question that Member Adams asked, and maybe just want to emphasize that it would be good that we get a detailed answer to that, because it will also help us with how our township fund is implemented. The other issue is the issue of support for SMMEs. How long are they incubated? How long are they there being supported inside the system? But at some point you need to release them, and how much support you give them after they've been taken out of the incubator. So because you can't support one group forever, but at the same time you can't throw them out, because we want them to be sustainable. And do you have a good story to tell of a person that started with the budget of, just making an example, 100,000 or 2,000 rand, and now he's getting millions, because you can't be an SMME forever. At some point, you really need to be a big business person. In terms of women and people with disabilities, the percentage, it will be interesting to see the percentage. And remember, the support that you give to women is different from a support that you give to men. We can say it's the same support, but, with women and people with disabilities, there is more care, but also there are a lot to consider, because these people are also, some of them are single mothers, some of them, of course, are disabled, etc., etc. So it should be interesting to hear from yourselves of what kind of extra support you give women and people with disabilities. The last one is similar to the one that I've just asked before, the latter one, is the issue of the impact. I've spoken about a demonstration on a person who started small and now is big, but an impact also on those that are not big, but they are completely independent. I'd also like to hear some form of demonstration from yourself of, do you have a system where you look at the impact as opposed to the outcome? Which in most cases, outcome is about numbers, but impact is about real change. So I would really like to hear that. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much to the chairperson. I just have a couple of questions. Let me first thank you also for the presentation and for taking time out to indulge us in the Gauteng legislature. The first is around the turnaround time from the moment the application is received to, of course, support or decline, but the ultimate implementation of. That's the first question. The second question is very similar to, I think, Chef Chairs. Let me just build on it. It won't be its own question. We've understood how long the incubation is, but is there an effective exit strategy? The other thing also that I'm quite interested in understanding is whether there are particular challenges in getting people living with disabilities, not just their businesses off the ground, but in terms of government utilizing their services, because those are always targets. Doesn't matter which municipality you're in, who runs it, doesn't matter. We are always undershooting in that regard. So I'm quite interested in that. And my last question is related to municipal bylaws and cutting red tape. So one of the things we've done in the Gauteng provincial legislature and in Gauteng government is we recently passed the Township Economic Development Act, which really is an incredible way in which we're cutting through a lot of red tape, but we're also having very targeted economic opportunity intervention. And I'm very interested to see if we're doing something similar here. And also, I think we'd be very interested to see the SMME booster funds vis-a-vis our township partnership fund and how we can really learn from those different experiences, because ours is now legislated and yours is more regulated. What are the advantages, disadvantages? So that's sort of related to that. I think the other questions I'll hold off for now because I think they might be asked by other members, and if not, perhaps Chairperson will allow me a second round to come in. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson. Just on the side, I'm not sure if the program allows it, but I'm really keen to hear more of the Township Economic Bill. If there is, over the next 3 days, we can get a presentation from our colleagues in Gauteng. I'm really keen to hear directly from the horse's mouth how that works. So if our colleagues can assist us, I'm not sure if that's possible, if they, but with your, when you're indulging as the chairperson of these sessions. My first question to the department, we've actually visited Bredasdorp, as you know, last week. And we did see one of the businesses, in fact, the one in your presentation. And following up on the question from the chair of chairs of the additional support, during load shedding, that business obviously can't function, and unfortunately so. So what, and we know the cost of a generator is 12,000 Rand, for example. And we've seen in one of our other visits to Hermanas how they invested in generators, but those are businesses that can afford to do so. All these businesses that you have funded and started, they do not have that financial muscle. In your support that we're providing them going forward, have you looked at some of the businesses of the last year and say, Ricardo is not surviving without a generator? The barber shop, for example, that we visited, the lady that sells the fish things at the, the guy that sells, the lady that makes the food in one of the containers, she can't function during load shedding. If you adapted your model to say this additional support, as the chair asked, that this business is going to need, for example, a generator. Are you looking at that? How are you looking at that, and how you support that? The second question would be the 36% of the businesses that are increasing revenue, well done, and the 64 support, the remainder of those businesses that has not done the increase of revenue. Are you looking at them and say, hey, what more can we do for you, and who's doing that? And the 36%, or this, as a chair says, how are you looking at upscaling them to say, hey, you've increased from 2,000 to 15,000, but you can actually do 80,000. Is that from you, or is that the fund itself? And the last question is the value. Okay, sorry, just one point. Between the 64,000 rand per business that's been generated and the 75,000, or vice versa, I can't remember which one, 75,000 per business or 64,000, there's a gap of 8,000 rand. Is that for the administration cost? If you can just cover that gap. I think you mentioned 64,000 of one of the slides, but whichever it is, 75,000 versus 64,000, there's a gap of 9,000. Where is that cost going to? Who's getting that money? And why is the difference between 64,000 and 75,000? And yes, I think it's cost per business versus cost per job. If then can you just get it? And from your department, what is your monitoring tools? How many times a year do you visit that auntie in the container, so that you as the department, as the fund provider, can see vis-a-vis the booster fund or some third party giving you a report that says this business is surviving or not surviving? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try and respond to some of the questions, Chair, but I'll also ask my colleagues to respond as well to some of the issues. So just in terms of the accelerators and also the support that we give to businesses in the digital economy. So the way we structure the thing, as I said, it's a demand-led fund where it's organizations that with particular projects to support SMMEs come. So what we've found is that through that particular process, there has been projects, if you look at, for example, the Art Labs, the Innovator Trust, where there is digital support being provided to those businesses, especially if we look at the Art Labs project in particular and the Innovator Trust, where they're able to kind of use digital technology to assist and support their business. I can ask Sharif maybe just to, in his response, to look at whether there's, now you spoke about the cash transactions or the digital transactions around the cash. I can ask Sharif to just to respond to that. So in terms of the criteria for the SMMEs to be onboarded, so what we do, our partner is with the organization. So part of what they would indicate to us is the type of businesses that they support and the number of businesses that they support. So we are not involved in the kind of the micro detail of them selecting businesses, because obviously if you look at an organization like Innovator Trust, they've got to meet a certain requirement linked to what Vodacom's requirement is. So they've got to choose and select businesses that can access, for example, the supply chain of Vodacom through the support of certain types of interventions. So they would have obviously done their own diagnostic on the type of businesses that are available and the kind of support that they would have. Like maybe to give you a practical example, the Innovator Trust, one of the projects that we've supported, one of the key issues was the health and safety requirements. So unless a business has a health and safety certificate in place, they're not able to, in that sense, engage or even get into the door at Vodacom. So when you go and do work either at these sites or whatever, you've got to have that in place. So that was one of the requirements of the project that Innovator Trust identified for that particular cohort of businesses. So we, in that sense, the department then supported. So it's, I think, important also, and I think that was one of the issues that came out of the project adjudication committee is, so I think for Booster Fund 2023, we're going to look closer at that selection criteria of the businesses that then gets onboarded onto the SMME Booster Fund. So in terms of the support that's not available to SMMEs, as the honourable member indicated, look, I think it's a general issue that SMMEs, and we engage with SMEs both from your kind of informal right up to your kind of large, medium type businesses. Many of them is not available of the support that is available by government, or also where to go, especially when you look at your smaller businesses, where to go for that support. But I think more importantly is that, and oftentimes we kind of cluster SMMEs in one category, but you've got to look at what is the stage of development of that business, what's the size of that business. So there's a lot of nuances, and that nuances will then inform the type of support that should be given to that particular business. And I think oftentimes as government, and I think that's why we've also tried through the Booster Fund, looking at a demand-led approach, because we give training to a particular business and we think that's going to make a significant difference. But you've got to be very clear on the type of business that you're going to support, the size, what are their specific needs. I mean, you can't just, for example, do a training program to businesses and then you bring a little micro businesses and you bring a medium-sized businesses into the thing, where the one business has a CFO in there and the guy with just starting his business. So one has got to be very careful in terms of the kind of support that you give. but being cognizant of the kind of the stage of the development, what sector do they operate in, what are the kind of requirements for them to operate in this particular sector, and the kind of support. For example, if you look at how do we support a business to access market opportunities, you've got to know that the businesses has the basic level of capabilities in place. So, for example, they may require a FSSP certificate or a HACCP certificate for them to be able to export their products to the global market. So it's about understanding who the businesses are and what the specific needs and requirements of those particular businesses are. In terms of warm-up, and I'll ask Sharif just to respond to that in terms of the budget around that one. In terms of it's what we call it a project evaluation committee. So it's not a public, so the project evaluation committee is all internal members within the department, the staff that we get utilized. And as I indicated, we pull the staff from different units in the department. So you have a cross-sectional of skills and expertise that will look at applications from different perspectives. And in that sense, you have a more informed or better, you choose better organizations based on the different skill sets that's around. So you look at the capabilities of the staff within the department. In terms of the support that we provide, obviously, as I indicated, it's normally over a 2-year program in terms of the support that gets offered to the businesses. But there's also, so organizations also develop relationships with these businesses that they do support. So it's not to say at the end of the 2 years, we're now going to stop supporting you. So there is, I mean, I know with Innovator Trust, they also engage with these organizations even after the fact in terms of providing them with support, because the issue is, because oftentimes it's not just the thing about implementing, giving them training, but also what we've learned through this particular booster fund is them giving them training, like for example, one of their CISA projects. The training is then coupled with mentorship. So you train somebody for a week, that mentor then goes back to that business to see whether what is being trained is actually being implemented in the business. And I think that's the beauty of something like a booster fund, because we look at a mix of support, because it's not just one issue that's going to take a business to grow. I mean, if you give a guy training, it doesn't mean he's going to grow automatically. You maybe need training, you need a bit of mentoring, you maybe need some equipment, as was indicated, say a generator or something like that. You need different things in a business to make that business grow over time. And obviously that impact is not felt immediately in that sense. In terms of the support to women and people with disabilities, so I think we've indicated, I think between 45 and 50% of women businesses are supported. In the disability, I think, Sharif, it's about 1%, 1 or 2% of the businesses that we supported are owned by people with disabilities. But even in that particular context, the partner organization would also then support, because they're obviously more familiar to what are the specific needs and requirements of those types of businesses. So in that sense, there'd be a greater hand-holding process for those particular businesses in terms of support. I mean, I agree that, look, in terms of the impact versus outcome, Honourable Member, that becomes a critical issue, because for us, it's not just about numbers. And I mean, generally, as you said, the outcome is about you've increased your turnover, you've created so many jobs, so we're happy, everybody's happy. I think what we're trying to achieve through the fund is to look at what has been the impact over time. So what are the mechanisms that we're putting in place now that will enable change in the business over a period of time? So I think that is, the advantage, like I explained with our CISA program, it's not just training, but there's ongoing mentorship and coaching support to those particular business owners. And I think that's been critical to the success. When I look at organizations like, Globescope, and the other one also that I flighted on the presentation, the critical thing for them was that mentorship, continued mentorship and support, that showed really what has been the impact and how that business has changed over time. In terms of the turnaround time, we assessed when the applications close, I think within 2 months, Sharif? 6 weeks. It's about 6 weeks. We finalized the process. So from date of closing of applications, 6 weeks later, we'll basically be able to identify who the successful applicants are. So what we do, there's an intensive process of pre-evaluation, evaluation committees and adjudication committees, and we try within 6 weeks to finalize that particular process. So obviously at times, especially when you had over 100 applications, and I think with the first round, we had a mix also where people presented us with physical documents. and you've got to read over 300 pages, it does become time consuming, but we've tried to streamline it through the online process, and that has significantly assisted. So within 6 weeks, organizations will know that they've been successful on the project. Okay. In terms of the exit strategy, as I said previously, there is a support mechanism that is available through those organizations. And in that sense, there's a continuation of relationships between the organization and the businesses that get supported. In terms of the municipal bylaws, and Honourable Member, and cutting of red tape. So, for example, we've got specifically a red tape reduction unit within the department that does assist and support businesses around issues including bylaws. And I mean, we've picked that up especially during the COVID-19 period and the different bylaws and rules and regulations that gets implemented. And it's about trying to facilitate so that businesses can access certain opportunities and services. And yes, I think that has been a contentious issue, I think, in the standing committee as well, around the, I know Gauteng is aware, has established or developed the Act, which is something that the Western Cape doesn't have at this stage. In terms of the support for load shedding, so Honourable Member, I mean, we are, as part of the Booster Fund, there is a facility that enables organizations to support businesses with equipment, but we're not specific in the type of equipment that they can provide support. But I think maybe just importantly to note is that it's fine to fund or to give a business generators, but I think the more fundamental issue is the operational cost of those generators and to what extent business can actually sustain that cost. And I think that is, so it's easy to say give a business a generator, but you've got to look at operationally, can the business sustain those particular costs as well? I mean, I know we've also got to look at issues of how do we look at energy efficiencies, bringing energy efficiencies within businesses. For smaller businesses, it's a bit more difficult. But I think it is an issue, Chair, that within our department, we've got an energy unit or chief directorate that is dealing with this particular issue in terms of the support that we're providing through to the municipalities in terms of municipal energy regulation program. So there is some kind of support that's been given to municipalities to look at how do we provide alternative sources of energy in certain localities. But it is a significant issue that has or is impacting significantly on the operations of businesses. We engage with businesses regularly around this particular issue, and it is severely impacting on businesses in terms of just their viability, especially when you look at businesses that use production processes and you've got a halt production process, because it's not just to say for that 2 hours you're halting production, you've actually got to stop it before the time, and oftentimes to start your production process takes a longer period as well. So those are issues that, Chair, that I think we are conscious of and trying to deal with in that particular regard within the department, and there is some kind of focus in the department around how do we deal with the current crisis around load shedding and the impact that it has on businesses. I'm going to ask my colleague Sharif, maybe there's a few things that I've missed out.
Yeah, thanks for that. Just in response to the sort of cashless transactions, so one of the aspects of the Art Labs sort of project, so what they do, they support a lot of micro enterprises, youth-owned enterprises, and as part of their support, they would like sort of, I think they like provided about 40% of the businesses with these like Yoko machines. So again, the sort of benefit of having a partner like the sort of Art Labs is that they have existing like relationships with the suppliers of these sort of machines. They are getting these machines at a much lower cost than what we could get them. And again, that is the sort of benefit of getting the private sector on board when implementing such like projects. I think there was also a question relating to the warm-up budget. So the department has committed to spending 2.9 million rand with the organization. Important to note is that 600,000 rand of the department's funding will go towards acquiring equipment. Another 600,000 rand would go towards providing cash grants, but the grants should have a specific sort of outcome. the organization themselves, they are going to be contributing 2.2 million rand. So some background on the organization. So they started as an organization called WOMEng, ENG for engineering. So their mandate initially was to really get engineering students into sort of business and also supplying qualified engineering students or providing them with employment opportunities. So they've got a very well-established working partnership with your mines, Anglo, and I think the beers as well. So this 2.2 million rand is actually coming from funding that they've sourced from I think it's the beers. So again, the value of the booster fund is that we are contributing 2.9 million rand, but the total value of the project is close to 6 because the organization that we are actually supporting, they are managing to leverage funding from organizations like the De Beers Mining Group. In the case of Innovator Trust, they are leveraging funding from the Vodacom Group. And something that I quite like about the model of the SME Booster Fund, it can support businesses in a range of the sort of development. Our labs are supporting like businesses that are like township based, it's youth, mainly women owned. So these are your small hairdressers, your small like clothing makers. Innovator Trust, they are supporting like businesses that has got the potential to like provide services to like Vodacom. So that is what we would refer to as an enterprise development program. The mandate of the Innovator Trust from the Vodacom Group is go and find me black ICT businesses that I can incorporate into my supply chain. You find them, you develop them, you sort of grow them, and I would then give them an opportunity in my supply chain. We are also this year implementing a project with Edge Growth. So again, their mandate came from the Sun Lam Group. And their mandate again was go out and get me black entrepreneurs, medium-sized businesses that can be mainstream suppliers into the Sun Lam Group. So that is just the sort of range that the booster fund can actually like incorporate and accommodate. Thank you.
We'll now take the next round of questions. Sorry, was there further feedback from the department side? Was there further feedback from the department side? Oh, apologies. Please go ahead.
Well, sorry, one of my questions about the generators and those additional support.
If I can just, sorry, did you have any feedback that you wanted to provide before further questions?
So, Chair, maybe just on the question, I mean, I think I did indicate that, look, as Sharif also indicated, there is space within the budget of those organizations that they can procure equipment, but I think we're not prescriptive in terms of that. And I think we take the comment made by the honourable member that I think with the next round of booster fund, clearly that's something that we should clearly take into account and make accommodation for as part of the criteria in terms of the support that we can provide. But I think currently for this financial year, we've already identified the organizations and the kind of support that we'll be giving to businesses. But I mean, there can be further discussions with those businesses depending on what the specific needs or requirements are around equipment, depending on the type of business that's going to be supported.
Thank you. I did know there were further questions from the Gauteng delegation. So we'll take 1, 2, 3.
Thank you, sir, for the presentation. But I read through this whole presentation, sir, and you never made mention of people or women living with disabilities. And my question is, why is women with disabilities or people living with disabilities left out of this presentation? And the second thing is, why are you only mentioning 3 to 5 women that are being boosted by this fund? Because women is a very important factor in the economy of South Africa. And we are more than you men. Why is it that you don't consider us. Please, sir, I'm not trying to be funny, but I need a proper answer on this, please. Thank you.
Thank you. To your colleague next to you.
Okay, thank you. Just a quick one. I think because your department is the economic development is separated from agriculture, but in our situation, they are we do oversight on both. Just around this SA Agri Academy, wherein you are having a development program on emerging farmers. You have indicated here that you provide training, mentoring, coaching, and technical support. Can you just elaborate for us what is the nature of the training? Is it soft skills based on business plans, finance, and marketing, or it's a real training on the programs on the ground in relation to agriculture specific or not? And you also mentioned the technical support. Can you also just elaborate or give an example of such a technical support so that we cannot just assume? I think most of the issues we will want to understand when we meet with the agriculture tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you. Further questions?
Thank you very much. And let me join those who are welcoming the presentation. Of course, overwhelming receiving it and having to engage it at the same time. And that's why I took my time to try and follow up on the discussions. But maybe the first point for me to raise would be that I take it this SME Booster Fund, when you speak about targeted and selected categories, you're referring to women and youth, so that I don't assume, because I don't see it anywhere clarified, except for the achievements that are there that shows the percentages of women and youth. And that's where I draw my conclusion. I don't want to assume, I want to confirm that the target that you are referring to or selected people that you are referring to are women and the youth. Of course, maybe you might be looking at people with disabilities at this point in time, and that's work in progress you are on. And still on the same note, you have mentioned that somewhere you would, I don't know whether it's in the example where you would have wanted or planned to have 30 women supported, 30 SME owned by women being supported. I just want to know how far are you now in terms of the target that you would have set for yourself. On the overview process that you highlighted in the presentation, my concern or my question would just be those that were unsuccessful, how do you communicate with them? How do we give them support to ensure that in future they can apply and also benefit from this fund, those who were not successful with the application? And when you looked or went back to try and assess the impact of this fund, you indicated a 36% of those who supported that have increased revenue. And my question will be, what do you then do with the 74%? You're just leaving it like that? Or is there a way of also enhancing their capacity to move to the level of the 36% that is indicated? I think the honorable member there covered me to a certain extent where he was asking about the generators and so on, because I saw one SMME saying the fund assisted them in paying for I think rent or so, yeah. And I was just asking myself, are you funding operational costs? Or do you have specifics that you're funding, or is just an open-ended kind of funding? And on the achievements in 2021, My maths does not add well there. You are saying you assisted 105 businesses and 96 jobs created. Do I assume that those were already existing businesses, and out of what you gave as support, that is what we have? Because the 105 and the 96 for me don't tally. If it's a new business and you have 105 of them that you supported and you have 96 jobs created, it's more businesses and less jobs. Maybe if you can just clarify me on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have a question, Honourable Member?
Thank you, Chair. I think we must receive it in the best possible light that we have so many questions.
Yes.
It shows we were very, very much in tune, and also we take this quite seriously. Just a few questions. The first is, in Gauteng, we have what we call the Gauteng Enterprise Propeller, JEP, who performs the role very much of what you've described. Now, I'm very interested to know if in the Western Cape the department does it directly or if you have an entity that does that. That's the first question. The second question is around the common conditions and guarantees that is used or created when leveraging funds in the private sector. I think that's quite important because we've done that quite successfully as well, and I'd be very interested to see where we can also build on there. I'm also interested to know in the infrastructure support for municipalities. When you're doing that alignment and planning with municipalities, how do you deal with the overall intergovernmental issues? The other stuff I'll probably put in writing, or maybe I'll ask it on the way. Can I just check, Chair, is the department accompanying us this afternoon?
So,
okay, so I'll ask some of my other questions in between here and there, not to take up too much time. Thank you.
Thank you, Member. No, absolutely noted. It's wonderful to be having such engagement today. Member Mackenzie.
Thank you, Chairperson. I'm going to come back to the generator question because it's not going to be a problem for next year because you might have funding available for next year. The problem that I'm picking up is the year currently because those are the businesses that we visited last week. So how do you support them because they couldn't service because they were down? So how do we support the current businesses to ensure that they don't falter over the next 4 or 5 months? Because when you have stage 4, stage 3, those businesses cannot function. So your statistics from the year 2020, 2019, I suspect some of the businesses are not going to survive. So how do you ensure they do survive for the next 4 or 5 months? And what are you putting in place to ensure that they don't have, the barber shop can't cut hair because there's no electricity. The lady that makes fish and chips can't make fish and chips because there's no electricity. So how do you ensure the current businesses survive? What support are you giving them to ensure that when you do your next oversight visit in 2 or 3 months, you don't find them closed? Because that is the risk they're facing. So that is more the question linked. And additional question is, of the businesses that has not been successful, let's go 2 years back, or even a year back, are they allowed to reapply, by the way? Are they right to reapply in 2 years' time to say? And from that lessons learned, how do you perhaps can ensure their survival? Thank you.
Thank you. Member, I see Member Gillian and then Member Maseko.
If I could maybe ask, Chair, is there a pathway for SMMEs to start also doing business with government if they want to? And what conversations or integration happens between the work that's being done at Provincial Treasury and the new procurement centre that I'm sure the delegation's visiting that as well? So how are we linking SMMEs to the procurement centre as well if they are in a specific space where what's the services they're providing is also services that government procure? Thank you.
See Member Mackenzie, but I'm actually going to hand over to Member Maseko.
Thank you very much. I just want to find out, I think maybe one question it will be, like for example, in agriculture, they will, if a person does the community or if a group, they're doing a community garden, they will tell them what vegetables to plant. Now, I want to find out from your side, if you vet per municipality, if you advise them, if you get a municipality and then they have to drive this, do you check the demand that is there? What type of business will be visible there to be sustained? Or it's per demand as they bring their business plan is where you sit down and say which one can you support without checking if that will be sustained or not. And maybe to check per municipality if you do have the retainer percentage of which municipalities have you seen that as they use the LED, there is an appetite to partner with you to make sure that it's one of the drivers for economic development within those municipalities in creating the jobs? And I think maybe it can be one of the questions. You won't have the answer now. I will get it after. I just picked up that will be a very packed answer to that. But if I can find out, the vetting is important, that for sustainability for those small businesses, if they know if it will work or not, because of you give the support there and there, they've got the idea, but is it viable? Because when we went to Bredasdorp, I was talking about the issue of wood. There's a lot of different wood, and a lot of people goes there to go and buy the wood in bulk. But for small businesses, they don't have that. It doesn't cater for that structural for them to can have a point where everybody can go there to buy that wood. So it's one of the things that maybe I identify that is needed, but do you have something like that that can assist the municipalities or assist those small businesses to say what is it that they can do within the different municipalities, because the needs are different within the communities within the province? Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Member. I see a final question from Member Mackenzie.
So lastly, one of the things that we've seen, those containers looks very dull. In your spec, you perhaps ask them to spruce it up a bit, because it's already in a community where we see low unemployment or high unemployment. There's no color in those containers, and there was no trees as well. The other side was full of trees, but there was no trees. Can they green it up a bit so it looks more inviting? Thanks.
Before I hand over to the department, I do have a few questions myself. So just with regards to WOM Hub, I wanted to get an understanding of what sorts of businesses are being supported. It does look like an amazing initiative. And what are your biggest success stories? Then I also wanted to understand, as our colleagues from GPL have raised the issue of the Township Bill or the Township Act now. What are the most significant legislative bottlenecks or red tape that you've faced to date? And also whether you feel that having legislation might help to alleviate that, and how. Thank you. Over to the department.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I think what we've tried to emphasize is just to respond to the issue on people living with disabilities, particularly focusing on women. I think that's, as part of the call for proposals that we've done since 2019, the three categories we looked at is women, youth, and people living with disabilities. So that's been a specific mention or emphasis in terms of the application. So we, as part of our evaluation process, will look at factors like that in terms of whether those categories are being targeted. So clearly there is a specific target around those three categories of support, especially the women, youth, and people living with disabilities. Yes, we've indicated the specifics on the women and youth in particular, but I mean, I think over the since 2019, there's been between 1% and 2% of the businesses that has been supported through the Booster Fund has been linked to people living with disabilities. And I'm not quite sure on the specifics of the statistics, but I would assume it cover both male and female owned businesses in terms of people living with disabilities. So there's a core focus in terms of those three sectors or those areas, because I think nationally we also need to look at how do we support businesses within those three particular categories or focus areas. It's also part of our annual performance plan in terms of as a program and as a unit where we give specific categories or targets linked to those particular three categories of support that we do provide to those three categories. So there's definitely an emphasis on people living with disabilities, but I think there's certain challenges I think that one needs to deal with in terms of providing the kind of support, because obviously as indicated previously, there is a different need of support that needs to be given. As a department, we also engage with organizations that do support people living with disabilities, and the needs and requirements are different in that particular regard. But there is engagement between the department and some of those particular organizations. In terms of the chair, the SA Agri, I'm going to ask the Sharif to talk to the details in terms of the nature of the training, the technical support that is provided. So there is definitely a target on women, youth, and people living with disabilities. Just re-emphasize that. In terms of the applications that are unsuccessful, so we do communicate with both successful and unsuccessful candidates. We do also indicate what is the reasons why these applications has been unsuccessful. So there is communications, and if there's a need or requirement, we can then also further engage. We do offer the organizations to engage with the department should further clarity be sought around those particular issues. But there are clearly areas where there is engagement with unsuccessful applicants. Just maybe also to touch on one of the other questions around the applications of unsuccessful. So any organization that doesn't get funding in this particular year can apply for the next round. So we, for example, have had in the recent past, just that is one of the organizations that has applied previously, they wanted to apply again. We had a discussion, they outlined to them what are the key issues why the application failed the last time. So there is those kind of conversations that is continuing in terms of unsuccessful applicants. So both those that have been unsuccessful and those that are successful can apply for the next booster fund as well. So that is open in that sense. In terms of the, let me just see the impact. In terms of the impact, so we've only identified the issues around the turnover. So there's some businesses, for example, that created additional jobs. So that could be part of that 74%. So we just identified or demonstrated the businesses that despite the impact of COVID-19, businesses were still able to increase their turnover. Obviously, I think given the impact of COVID, one would have assumed that that percentage would be much more significant or higher than the 36%. But we just wanted to demonstrate in a way, Chair, that through the support that the fund provided, it enabled businesses still to increase their turnover in that sense. But it doesn't mean that the other 74% or the 64% of businesses was not able to, there wasn't any significant change in those particular businesses. And remember, that's only a snapshot in a particular period in time in terms of the statistic. As I said, also, over time, you'll find, as I demonstrated with the Innovator Trust, 3 years later, your businesses are seeing the impact of the interventions. And I think that's a thing I think often misunderstood is that how long, because it's like asking the question, how long is a piece of string between from the time of intervention till you see when the impact of of an intervention is on a particular business. In terms of the rental costs, so just on that particular issue, Honourable Member, what the department had during that particular time was the COVID-19 relief fund, and that organisation or business was supported through that relief fund so that they could then support, because part of what we tried to do through the relief fund was to support businesses to deal with some of the operational costs and cover some of the operational costs. So that was one of the criteria that we used as part of the relief funding that particular business applied for. Then just in terms of the 105 businesses that were supported, so the 96 jobs is across the 105 businesses. So you may find a situation, I mean, I can ask Sharif maybe just to give the details of the statistics, but some of the businesses may have created, say, 5 jobs. Others may create 10, others may just create 1 job. So it's not to say that a job was created in each of the 105. So some created more, some created less, others remained constant in terms of employment, but that's the total number of jobs that was created given within this very short period of time. In terms of the Gauteng enterprise provider, so in the Western Cape, we don't have an entity of that nature. So the department in that sense does everything by itself. The only agency that's aligned to the department is the organization called Westgrow, which focuses a lot on the trade and investment promotion. But so everything around enterprise development is done both internally within the department. Then also just in terms of the issue around the load shedding, so how do we support businesses currently? Chair, I think that is, it's a difficult question. It's something that the department is busy discussing at the moment. There is a group that is dealing with that particular issue to look at how do we support businesses during this particular period. Obviously, I think key consideration will have to be the issue around funding and what support we can offer in the current fiscal envelope. Because if you're going to support businesses, you're going to have to support everybody with generators. And I think the point that I made earlier on, Chair, is more importantly is the operational cost linked to operating the generator. I think that is more fundamental question that we need to ask, because if we're not generating turnover, because of the impact of load shedding. It's also going to impact on your cash flow and your bottom line of the business and your ability to sustain using the generator. So that becomes an important issue, I think, just to bear in mind. In terms of the pathways to businesses, in terms of working with government, so a lot of what we do within the department, not just through the SME Booster Fund, but some of the other initiatives, is to look at how do we enable businesses to do work with government. So we, for example, partnering with the Department of Transport and Public Works on the construction information sessions. So part of it, what we try and expose to businesses, apart from just the compliance issues, is for them to be aware what other access to economic opportunities are available from both the public and the private sector, because oftentimes businesses are not aware. So you've got to first get your compliance issue sorted before you can engage with government. But I think the issue then is to also expose them to opportunities in terms of what are the other avenues of support, because oftentimes you just think of government, you don't think of parastatals. What we've also in the past, Chair, tried to do quite significantly is how do you pivot those that are supporting government from a tender point of view to also then look at supporting your private sector. So that you just don't become dependent on what they call traditionally tenderpreneurs, but you're also looking at how do you engage with the private sector to access economic opportunities through that. So there are other initiatives in the department. As Sharif indicated, for example, the Innovator Trust provides him with an opportunity to access opportunities in the private sector in that sense as well. In terms of the community gardens and also the example used around community gardens and how do we identify businesses based on demand, I think that it's a critical question, and I think that becomes important. So I think part of the submissions that's done by the municipalities, they've already done some analysis in terms of what are the kind of key location sites, why they believe the site is important, and the kind of type of businesses. So each municipality, so we work very closely with the LED officials in the different municipalities as part of the rollout of this particular initiatives, and also obviously other areas within the municipalities like your technical services, your engineers and those people as well. But there's a very close alignment because we work very closely in our department with the Municipal Economic Support Unit that provides support to municipalities from a capacity point of view. So they're quite central in the development of the IDP and the LED processes. So we work quite closely with them and the LED managers in that particular regard, because the municipality has a process, an application process that, so that's why we engage also with the LED officials to make sure that you get the right kind of mix of businesses in those, in those trading spaces. And I think, Chair, I think based on our personal experience in terms of the work that we've done with that, sometimes you don't get the mix right, but I think over time you kind of get the mix right in terms of identifying what are the specific types of businesses that should be ideally located based on the needs and requirements of the communities in that particular area. So I take the point, I think, Chair, on the how do we spruce up the containers that was made. I think it's something that we'll definitely take up with the municipality. But I think for us, predominantly on that particular issue, it's about creating the space. I think the space in and of itself needs to create its own lifeblood in terms of within the community, and how do you, in terms of support with the municipality, how do you look at developing and growing businesses, not just businesses, but how do you create the trading space as an attraction point within a locality? And I think that's a conversation, I think, Chair, that we need to further with the municipality, so that we look at, obviously municipality will have constraints in terms of from a funding point of view, but I think that's something that we can definitely take up with them to not just that be a trading space, but it becomes a center for economic and social activity. We've had examples in Mossel Bay where it's not just a trading space, but it's also a space where kids can come play. There's a play area, there's a bit of a garden area. So it does become a bit of a mix in that particular area. I'm going to ask Sharif just to talk to the warm-up. And in Chair, in terms of the Act, in terms of having legislation and how that can help, I think, Chair, look, I think from a legislative point of view, there is merits to it, but I think also, even despite, I think, the presence of legislation, the department has supported businesses within township areas. And I mean, there's quite significant, if you look at the Labit, Assisa, Fix Forward, True North, the South African Education Project, Kaidicha Ban, just to mention a few, there's been a core focus in terms of supporting township-based businesses as part of the particular support given to businesses. So I think, Chair, there is significant support given to township businesses, but I think the department, as part of our broader growth for job strategy, is looking at the township approach in terms of how we respond to the township, the growth for job strategy that the department is busy driving. Thanks, Chair. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. I just want to respond to the agriculture question. So the SA Agri, so what they do, they actually partner with an organization called the Perishable Product Export Council Board, and they would then actually provide the funding for the primary agri support. The technical skills would include services like soil testing, borehole water testing. As part of the support, the mentors allocated to the actual project would provide, I think they call it planting schedules, harvesting schedules, and they would then provide a hands-on support to the emerging farmers as well. So our contribution to the sort of project would then include the business plan training, your financial, your marketing sort of training, more your softer sort of business skills. So you have a combination of your technical agricultural primary skills, which we are not experts in, and then you have the sort of business skills which the department would then, or the funding from the department would then actually give. Then just in terms of the warm-up, so the organization itself, they focus on STEM businesses, your science, technology, engineering, and manufacturing businesses. So we are awaiting the 30 shortlisted or the 30 accepted women-owned businesses. I have seen the sort of long list, and the long list includes businesses that are in metal manufacturing, in CMT, your clothes, cut, make and trim, and there are businesses that are doing hair braid manufacturing. We've seen there are businesses that are in the ICT sector as well. So that is the sort of core sectors that the organization warm-up would focus on. Thank you.
Thank you, colleagues. I note that we have 9 minutes left, but I'm also standing between you and your lunch. So I would like to recommend that in the meantime, we can have a little body break, adjourn today's meeting, or this portion of it, and then you can go through to lunch in the meantime. Thank you. Yes, so it'll be in the members' lounge where you were this morning. Okay, thank you, everyone, and thank you to the department.